Mr. Mackenzie, Mr. Chuck, Dr. Tufton, Mrs. Williams, Mr. Vaz, Mrs. Malahoo Fort, Mr. Charles Jr., Mr. Green, Mr. Morgan, Mr. Warmington, Mr. Main, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Mr. Terry Long, Dr. Dunn, Mr. Hutchinson, Mr. Whittle, Ms. Smith, Mr. Davis, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brownberg, Dr. Charles, Mr. Chin, Mr. Clark, Mr. Cousins, Ms. Crawford, Ms. Daly, Ms. Davis, Mr. Golding, Mr. Graham, Dr. Guy, Ms. Hamilton, Ms. Hannah, Mr. Enriquez, Mr. Henry, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Lawrence, Ms. Lee, Mr. Miller, Mr. Montague, Ms. Morrison, Mrs. Nita Garvey, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Robertson.
Members on both sides, the deputy clerk is calling the register. Surely you want to hear whether or not your name is there or not, because there are many strangers to the house. So answer your name.
Mr. Robertson, sorry. Mr. Robinson, Mr. Samuda, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Sibbles, Mr. Slowly, Mrs. Vaz, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams, Mr. Wilson, and Mr. Wright.
Just before, members.
I did, but you weren't present.
You were not.
Mr. Warmington? Mr. Warmington?
Members.
Who, Davis?
As you...
And Miss... Okay. I'm sorry, madam.
Go ahead, dear.
So I've taken note of both Davis, who came in after their names were called. Thank you, madam.
Members, as usual, I want to welcome you all to another sitting of this House of Representatives. I want to extend a special welcome to those who are joining us online via the various social media platforms. And I also want to welcome any member who is a stranger to this House and look forward to us renewing our acquaintance here in this House. And with that, House Opposition.
Madam Speaker, I had sought your eye on the roll call.
1 minute.
Yes.
1 minute. Members, out of respect for your fellow colleagues, there's a heavy hush in the Parliament, and the leader of opposition business is on his feet, and I ask that we pay the respect and listen to what he's saying. Go
Yes,
ahead.
Madam Speaker, I wanted to take note of a report on the attendance of parliamentarians in this House and to query the efficiency of the system that we now have to record attendance. And yes, we start with roll call, and in our minutes we see from time to time a member has entered and so on. But I was very distraught that the report that came out last week appeared to have inaccuracies in them. And I think in this modern age we must find a better way. And where people are looking for greater accountability to record the attendance of members of parliament. And I'm going to propose that we have an urgent discussion on this so that we can correct what needs to be corrected, so that we can have true reflection of the attendance of our colleagues.
Madam
Accept
Speaker.
that. One moment, House Leader.
Yes.
I notice you have said the efficiency of the system and appear to have. Remember, there's one thing to check the records here, and there's another thing as to whether the reporting is efficient. So not just the accuracy of what is here, but the accuracy also of what is reported, where it is reported. House Leader.
Correct. Madam Speaker, you have captured some of my thoughts in your very eloquent rebuttal. But just to indicate further that members, yes, sorry, Madam Speaker, that members ought to be reminded too that the record of your presence in the House is also influenced by when there is a divide. And that notwithstanding the fact that you may have been registered as present at the start of the sitting, if at the point when a divide is taken you are absent, you are deemed to be absent for the day. So that the essence of the opposition House leaders' thoughts I share, and I do think that we need to look a little deeper in terms of how, not just the recording, but our own understanding of what will constitute being present or not for the sitting of the House. Madam Speaker, it is in that context too that I want to just indicate further to my own comments in the budget presentation that a deeper look is going to be taken at how we are prepared for this Honourable House and the level of training and guidance that we get in order to execute our duties. So I just wanted the member to know that, yes, your point is well taken, and yes, we will make the necessary discussion time available so as to make sure that this is important area, because we are here as representative of our people, and they want to know that we come to the House, but more so that the reporting is accurate. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Members, also the other thing is that there are occasions when persons are not in this House, but they are away for legitimate business, and there are apologies that are tendered. So really and truly, it has to be that we look into not just what is written on the record, but how it is reported, and also take into account apologies that are tendered from time to time, because members are sometimes away on government business, and there are legitimate reasons why they are not here. The point is well taken. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, on the matter of statements by ministers, it is intended today to have two statements for sure. A third statement is very likely, but I'm awaiting further particulars on that, Madam Speaker, and I will advise the opposition House Leader in that regard. But for the purposes of now, Madam Speaker, the Minister of National Security and the minister responsible for gender affairs will make statements. It's also expected that the Minister of Health and Wellness will have a statement at a later point today. May I invite you then, Madam Speaker, to ask the first Minister of National Security and Deputy Prime Minister to make a statement.
Minister of National Security and our Deputy Prime Minister, the Honourable Dr. Horace Chan.
Madam Speaker. Yeah. This one's all right. Let's speak. All right. They're working better. Julian, you're in better shape. They're working better, apparently. They're working well for us, so they sort out. Madam Speaker, it's my pleasure to report to Parliament today that further to the government's commitment to transform Jamaica's police force into a modern law enforcement institution, reflecting a force for good, and its commitment to reduce the number of contract workers within the public service, a total of 1,105 permanent civilian posts will be regularized in the Jamaica Constabulary Force. Madam Speaker, in the context of the total labour force, it's a small number, a significant number for the force. But in addition to that, it reflects the government's commitment to improve the quality, the working condition and the quality of life of the working people within the government, or throughout Jamaica really, but in this particular case, government workers. These are workers who are traditionally been kept as temporary workers, contract workers, and when they have very little benefits, and when they retire, in particular, they retire in absolute poverty. Madam Speaker, this marks a major and significant milestone in the practice of employing civilian workers to support non-policing function in the Jamaica Constabulary Force. These workers for several decades were employed on fixed-term contracts, which limited their access to critical health and pension benefits. Madam Speaker, the Office of the Services Commission undertook an audit and produced a report entitled Human Resources Audit Report. Police Department in relation to the management of the functions delegated under Public Services Regulation 1961 for the period August 1, 2018 to April 30, 2022. The audit revealed that the Jamaica Constabulary Force had a civilian complement of approximately 1,900 persons, and close to 50% were employed on a contract basis, as they had a casual daily paid CDP in the civil service jargon, or part-time workers. As a consequence, Madam Speaker, and in fulfillment of the mandate to improve compensation and benefits afforded to public sector workers, the Ministry of National Security undertook the necessary consultation with the Ministry of Finance and Public Service to increase the civilian establishment of the Jamaica Constabulary Force to address this anomaly and to execute a new policy direction of the government critical to improvements in the quality of life of our workers. This administration, Madam Speaker, led by the Most Honourable Andrew Holness, remains steadfast in its drive to create a public sector characterized by efficiency, productivity, and competitive salaries for the hard-working people of Jamaica. Improved service is crucial, but improved condition of work for workers is crucial in achieving those outcomes. Madam Speaker, just to indicate that the duties performed by the civilian staff include administrative roles in areas such as accounting, human resource management, medical services, information technology, sanitation, and janitorial services. Their work is critical to the proper functioning of the organization and allows the trained servicemen and women to focus more fully on core policing functions that directly combat crime. Given the character of the workers being engaged as well, Madam Speaker, it improves the environment in which the officers have to perform. These workers will now be able to access the benefits afforded to permanent government employees, such as the health and pension schemes, which provide basic health insurance to offset medical expenses and pension benefits upon retirement. Madam Speaker, most importantly, the practice of sending these workers home after more than 30 years of service in many cases, which was a handshake, will now end. Madam Speaker, it was indeed a travesty of justice, a legacy which we had to correct, and reflects to the overall the move by the Ministry of Finance to ensure that the public sector as a workforce is improved. Yes. Madam Speaker, while the change will result in an increase in the total compensation of workers, it is a necessary increase and will collectively benefit what I consider to be among the most vulnerable group of workers in the institution of the Jamaica Constabulary Force. This positive development outweighs the additional expense by far. It will affect secretaries, and I'll give the numbers: office attendants, cell attendants. There will be 17 secretaries, records clerk 21, office attendants 348. These are the least of the least, literally, who will be working for years, keeping the station in good order, and when they retire, they literally disappear. Motor vehicle washer, 111. Male attendant, 47. Female attendant, 6. Cell attendants, 26. Messengers and attendants, 252. Kennel attendants, 3. Groundsmen, the gardeners, 268. Handyman, 6. That total of 1,105 laborers who is a better condition. Indeed, demonstrating our concern for the welfare and well-being of our homeless citizens who do this work which is required. Madam Speaker, to conclude, this administration will continue its focused effort to improve the public sector and to deliver programs to attain the goals articulated in the National Development Plan Vision 2030 to make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. I want to thank you, Madam Speaker. Please, you.
Presentation by the Minister is most welcome. The JSF has been suffering over a long period of time by inadequate personnel to carry out real policing work, and therefore it is appropriate that the non-technical, non-specialized skills that a police has developed, trained and developed in, are not wasted in areas that others who are not so trained can carry out. And therefore, for non-trained police, civilians who can carry out these functions and release more manpower on the ground in the communities is most welcome. Indeed, the provision of benefits for these usually ancillary workers is most deserving and welcome. We have spoken about it many times in respect to our hospitals and in our schools, and therefore for it to be extended for those in the police stations across the country, it is most welcome, and therefore we have no difficulty with the Minister's announcement today. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I wish to invite your attention to refer the next speaker, the Minister of Entertainment, Gender, Sports, and many things more, and Deputy Leader of the House, to make her presentation.
I now invite the Minister of Gender, Entertainment, Sports, Culture, and indeed our Deputy House Leader, who is with us very often, to make her presentation this afternoon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you. Madam Speaker, as the Jamaican branch of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, the CPA, Parliament will host a hybrid Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians Regional Conference on Women's Political and Parliamentary Leadership at the Jamaica Pegasus Hotel on July 12, 2023. That's tomorrow, Madam Speaker. the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians is the arm of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, the CPA, whose mission is to promote the representation of women in CPA branches and women's full and equal participation in all political and parliamentary leadership at all levels. The CWP represents more than 3,000 women parliamentarians in over 180 Commonwealth, national and subnational parliaments across the 56 countries in the CPA's 9 regions. By way of background, in April 2023, the Parliament of Jamaica was invited through Member of Parliament Tamika Davis, CWP's representative from Jamaica, to bid on behalf of the CPA Caribbean, Americas and Atlantic region for a grant of £10,000 sterling, approximately $1,900,000 from the CWP Regional Strengthening Funds, which is referred to as the RSF. The RSF is a scheme under which the 9 regions of the CPA are provided with grants to implement projects to advance the CWP's mission in the region. Madam Speaker, further to discussions between myself as the Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport, along with the CWP representative and the Parliamentary Administration, a decision was taken to submit a proposal for Jamaica to host the CWP Regional Conference on Women's Political and Parliamentary Leadership. Jamaica's proposal, Madam Speaker, was successful, and the Parliament has been awarded the grant to cover the financial arrangements.
Is it my imagination that there is a loud hush and the House Leader is speaking, the Deputy House Leader and Minister is on her feet?
So, Madam Speaker, the requisite technical direction for the hosting of the conference will be provided by the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport. Jamaica's Parliament currently has a total of 26 women parliamentarians, 18 members of Parliament and 8 senators, the highest in our history. Additionally, with the recent establishment of a bicameral caucus of women parliamentarians, there is tremendous momentum for the greater participation of women in the political and parliamentary processes in Jamaica. The proposed conference will seek to educate women parliamentarians about the proper functioning of a parliamentary women's caucus by building on the work of 2 recent workshops on developing gender caucuses held in December 2022 and March 2023, when we had the participation of women in the Senate and in the House on both sides of the divide, meeting at the workshops and really coming out with good results and a commitment that we will work together in the interests of our women and our families. The conference will also sensitize non-parliamentarians about the legislative process and explore how women's...
No, members, no. Please, I have already said this is a milestone and the Deputy House Leader and the Ministers on her feet, and it can't be that we are not listening. Please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, the proposed conference will seek to educate women parliamentarians about the proper functioning of a parliamentary women's caucus by building on the work, as I said before, of the workshops that were held late 2022 and earlier this year. The conference will also sensitize non-parliamentarians about the legislative process and explore how women's issues may be promoted in the legislature and identify how legislation can be used to protect women and vulnerable groups in the Caribbean society. Madam Speaker, the conference, which will be conducted in a hybrid format with in-person participation by 80 local attendees and remote overseas participants, is expected to facilitate meaningful exchanges among approximately 300 parliamentarians, women councillors, leaders in the private and public sectors, and youth leaders from the 19 branches in the region. Provision will also be made for self-funded, non-Jamaican CWP members who wish to attend the conference in person. The CWP Regional Conference on Women's Political and Parliamentary Leadership will be solely funded by the RSF grant of £10,000 sterling and will cover such things as the venue, the meals, speakers, the presenters, equipment, stationery, decor, photography, and entertainment. So, Madam Speaker, just to give you an idea of the program, of course, you're down to do the welcome, Madam Speaker, and the clerk of the House will, of course, make remarks. Myself will make remarks, and we will have an exciting performance by this outstanding young artist, Jamila Falak. Now, the sessions, session 1, the theme, multi-party, cross-party women's caucuses. The session will be chaired by Member of Parliament, Ms. Tamika Davis, who is the regional representative for the Commonwealth Women's Parliamentarians and the steering committee here in Jamaica. And presentations will be made by Ms. Eilish Elliott, Project Manager for Gender Equality, Parliamericas, and Dr. Angela Brown-Burke, MP, Deputy Leader of Opposition Business in the House. Ms. Eilish will speak to approaches, issues, and solutions, and Dr. Angela Brown-Burke will speak to the need for women's caucuses at the local government level. Session 2, Senator Donna Scott Motley will chair session 2.
Just a moment. The deputy leader of the opposition is not Dr. Angela Brown-Burke. The leader is Mrs. Natalie
she's chair.
Garvey.
Chair of the, yes.
Right,
okay.
thank you.
Right. Senator Scott Motley will chair the second session, and the presentation will be made by the Honorable Marlene Malahoo Ford. The theme, the legislative process. And there will be a panel discussion, and the participants will be Ms. Tony Broadber, representative of UN Women, Multi-Country Office, Caribbean, Ms. Benite de Bateza, Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians Network Coordinator, and Mrs. Sharon Coburn Robinson, Principal Director of the Bureau of Gender Affairs. Session 3, which speaks to legislation protecting women and other vulnerable groups. That session will be chaired by Senator Shireen Golding Campbell, and the presentations will be made by Senator the Honorable Kamina Johnson-Smith, the Honorable Dolores Valderramos Garcia from Belize, and the Honorable Dr. Virginia Albert Poyot from St. Lucia. And the closing remarks will be made by the Most Honorable Juliet Holness, and I will give the vote of thanks. So, Madam Speaker, I thought that Parliament would be interested in hearing about this conference and being proud of the fact that as women parliamentarians, we are ensuring that we play a part in nation building. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I believe this is quite timely due to the fact that as women in Parliament here, we start having our own caucuses. And I'm very happy to know that they have chosen Jamaica as a venue. I'm also very happy that on both sides we'll be able to participate in a meaningful way. I'm a little disappointed because I'm not too certain if I have overlooked the agenda, but I was looking for some political affiliation in terms of participation. I've not seen any on the agenda. The PNP Women's Movement, I do not know if they were invited, and I do not know if the Jamaica Labour Party have any movement or there is any other. But the fact is, for us to have it as parliamentary and political, because a political movement, that should be a part of it. However, Madam Speaker, I believe, and there are other groups, I have not seen anything with any representative from any of the local groups that is representing women in this country. However, it is a national affair. However, the fact that we are hosting it, we should try to include all of our women in this country. I applaud it. I will be participating tomorrow, and I will make sure that at the end of it, I must be able to take back something to my various communities. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, just to respond, we have reached out to councillors and councillor caretakers, but we have not involved the political parties directly, since we are dealing with a parliamentary group and we are working through an understanding of how the legislative process works. At the next stage, we should look at how we are going to bring women in both parties together and go through that process as well. But at this particular time, we're dealing with Parliament and the legislative process at the central government level and at the local government level. Thank you.
House Leader. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the House are the following. Annual report of the Private Security Regulation Authority for the period April 1, 2017 to March 31, 2018. Ministry Paper number 70 of 2023 entitled Annual Report of the Private Security Regulation Authority for the period April 1, 2017 to March 31, 2018. The Annual Report of the Integrity Commission for the financial year 2022-2023. Ministry Paper number 71 of 2023 entitled The Green Economy Investment Strategy for Jamaica. The report of the Green Economy Investment Strategy for Jamaica, the Integrity Commission's report of investigation into concerns that former Senator Leslie Campbell failed to provide information requested by the Commission in respect of his statutory declarations and indicative the ruling regarding the said report. The Integrity Commission's reports of investigation concerning investigation into allegations of breaches of the Corruption Prevention Act and the Integrity Commission Act by the following employees of the Southeast Regional Health Authority and the indicative rulings. 1. Dr. Yvonne Monroe Whitmore, 2, Dr. Moyna Spencer, 3, Dr. Trudy Ann Johnson, 4, Dr. Christopher Wilkes, and 5, Dr. Keith Clark. And finally, we have the Integrity Commission's report of investigation concerning allegations of breaches of the Corruption Prevention Act and the Integrity Commission Act by Sarita Hoylett, an employee of the Jamaica Customs Agency, and its indicative ruling. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Members, you will notice I have tabled this afternoon 9 reports from the Integrity Commission. 6 of these reports were tabled in the Senate on the 30th of June, 2023. The other 3 reports concern 1, an employee of the Customs Agency, 2, the annual report of the Integrity Commission, 3, the annual report of the Private Security Regulation Authority, which were received subsequently to the other reports tabled in the Senate. Reports are now being tabled subject to further discussions with the Attorney General's Department. House Leader? Yes.
Madam Speaker, we note the tabling of the report from the Integrity Commission. You had advised the Parliament last week that you had written to the Attorney General for guidance in relation to the Auditor General. Firstly, Auditor General's report. Are you going to comment on that this week?
I'm not commenting. I have not received the guidance from the Attorney General's office.
Madam Speaker, was there guidance in relation to the Integrity Commission? Because I know
no, I have not received any guidance.
No. Did you inquire about the Integrity Commission? Because them haven't been tabled. I would assume that you've gotten the clearance to table them.
I recall telling this Parliament that I'm not the Alpha and the Omega. And since the reports, the 5 reports were tabled in the Senate, 6 reports were tabled in the Senate on the 30th of June, the other 3 reports that are here relate to the annual report and to 2 persons, one from the Customs Agency and the other one is from the, another agency. I have decided we are in discussions with the Attorney General and I await their communication with me in relation to their advice.
We had heard from another place that in relation to the annual report of the Integrity Commission, it was a view that these should be put before the committee dealing with the Integrity Commission, but you have reversed that position.
I have reversed nothing. I have merely said I'm in discussions with the Attorney General's chambers, as I indicated. I indicated I have a particular understanding as to how the law reads and operates to me. But whenever there is any doubt in my mind, the correct thing for me to do is to seek the Attorney General's guidance. And to this date and this moment, I have not received the guidance. And so I have 6 reports are already in the public space, and the other reports relate to the Customs Agency and to this other private company. And I have decided that I will await, and I have been assured that the Attorney General's chambers is moving as speedily as it can to give us their guidance. And so I will await their guidance, which I expect we will have soon. And that is the only thing I can say on the matter.
No, fair enough, Madam Speaker, but I just want to ensure that I hear you correctly.
Yes,
you did say that in relation to the Integrity Commission's report, you did have discussions with the Attorney General's chambers, and out of that, you feel... No.
I did not say. I said, and you can check House Leader, I said my role is not ceremonial. That is my understanding of the law. And I have sought the guidance of the Attorney General's chambers. So I wait the guidance of the Attorney General's chambers.
Just to restate our position, and it is that we believe that while you await the guidance, as you have done here, the reports should really to be tabled, which is a practice that we have become accustomed to. And that, Madam Speaker, perhaps you might want to reflect on that and indeed have those reports tabled.
I note your what you have said, and I hold strongly to the view that the law must take precedence over practice, and I await the guidance of the Attorney General. And that is it.
Madam Speaker,
yes.
I welcome the tabling of these reports, but I'm concerned because it's a reversal of your decision of last week not to table them, plus you're tabling more. My first question, are there outstanding Integrity Commission reports that have been sent to you that have not been tabled? Secondly, on the issue of the Auditor General's report, while I hear you waiting on the opinion, I believe, having read Section 30 of the FAA Act, that is straightforward in terms of the provision. The provision relates to public bodies, and the two entities which you refer to are executive agencies, which are governed by an Executive Agency Act. It also refers to the Auditor General doing an audit of annual accounts, whereas in this case, they were performance audits. So even without the opinion of the Auditor General, of the Attorney General, it is clear to me that the provision which you relied on is not relevant to the reports which were done by the Auditor General. So I'm trying to understand the principle on which you're operating. You have reversed last week's decision. You have, thankfully, tabled reports from the Integrity Commission. But I'm not understanding, given that reversal, why you would not table the Auditor General's reports, since you are still awaiting an opinion from the Attorney General's department.
And, member, I want to reiterate and be as clear as ever. I have not reversed anything. I indicated very clearly to this Parliament that I stand corrected on the advice of the Attorney General, because whenever there is a difference of opinion, as there is now with your interpretation and with what I have interpreted, since I am the Speaker and I must understand, the law requires that I seek the advice of the Attorney General. And I have done just that. I note with interest that you say today that it is very clear to you. Last week, when I invited you to read the Act, and it was very clear sitting in front of you, and right now, I just must advise the members of this House and the country that I await the advice of the Attorney General on who I will.
Madam Speaker.
And that is my ruling.
Madam Speaker, if I may, I'm a little perturbed because you have in your possession some reports from the Auditor General. I, as a member, do not know what kind of reports, but I am a little surprised to hear the member from Southeast, I believe, St. Andrew, saying there are performance audits. How does he know that? How does he know what kind of report the Auditor General has submitted to the Parliament? How does he know?
Would you understand, respond, member? All right. No,
Madam Speaker, is it that he has sight of these reports? Is it that something is not right?
All right.
Madam Speaker, something is rotten in the state of Denmark. Something is not right. So, Madam Speaker,
Member, no. Will you just allow me? I am speaking. Member.
Madam Speaker, Can you ask the member? Can you ask the member to?
No, I am not doing anything of the sort. I have told you exactly what my position is, member. I am awaiting the advice of the Attorney General, and for me, that is my ruling on the matter. Member, please do not ask.
Clarity, madam. Clarity, please, madam. Please.
There's no clarity.
No, madam. Totally different matter. I accept that you are seeking guidance, and there's absolute. I support you, but on a different matter. The member rose in his capacity as a member, yes, and he has informed us, yes, that the Auditor General report that you have in your possession is a performance audit, and it is not tabled. So he needs to inform this House how he got that information. Madam Speaker, let him stand up. Stand up and talk, you coward.
Do you want to inform the House how you wrote your 6-page response when the report was
Madam
just
Speaker,
tabled?
I can
inform
tell you,
the House.
God bless.
Madam, please, Madam Speaker.
Tell us, did you have sight?
Madam
Since
Speaker.
you want to go there, did you have sight of the report
Please.
before? Did you have sight of the report
Please.
before? Sit down. Sit down.
No, Madam Speaker.
It's like you. Don't like you.
Madam Speaker, on a point of order, Yeah. Madam Speaker. Yes.
I have ruled, and I expect you to respect my ruling. And member from the left, you can answer your questions that you have brought to light at a different time. I have ruled on the matter. I have said why the reports have been tabled, and I'm moving to the next item. House Leader. No!
Madam Speaker, the members are now compliant, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we wish to assure that this Honourable House takes your ruling very seriously. And we are guided by the statements that you've made concerning what the Auditor General's report was, and indeed what the Attorney General's guidance has been for you today, and that you await further guidance, and we take that very seriously. Madam Speaker, I now invite you to continue the order paper as presented with the next item.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally. Reports from committee, notices.
Madam Speaker, I make this point with a heavy heart because in the normal run of things, I think our member no doubt will have a comment to make with regards to the need for us to ask for a recommittal of the item statement by ministers in order to allow the Minister of Health to make the statement which was intended to be made earlier. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Members, the question before the House is that we have the recommittal of the item statements by ministers. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and my apologies for the recommittal to my colleagues. Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, I take this opportunity to update this Honourable House on the current status of the COVID-19 and other respiratory illnesses, as well as the report on dengue in Jamaica. This comes, Madam Speaker, on the heels of detected concerns about these illnesses from among stakeholders within the population, including some members of this Honourable House, minority leader on that side. Madam Speaker, the island is currently seeing an increase in positivity rate for COVID-19. This means that for the number of tests done, the proportion of positives is actually increasing. Overall, Madam Speaker, colleagues, the actual numbers are not showing a consistent increase and, generally speaking, remains relatively low. Over the past 4 weeks, there have been an average of 87 confirmed cases. The number of cases are not increasing. The average 7-day positivity rate is about 22%. I know there is 17 on the statement, but it's actually about 22%. Now, this is clearly higher than what we would like to see. Ideally, of course, none, but on average about 5 or so %. Of note, the circulating variant is a highly transmissible Omicron variant. Madam Speaker, the last batches of genomic sequencing done on samples collected in March and April showed that its subvariants XBB.1.5 and BQ.1.1 were most prevalent. So, there's a scientific explanation for what these are, but it falls under the Omicron variant strain. Madam Speaker, as of July 10, 2023, Jamaica has recorded a total of 155,455 confirmed COVID-19 cases and 3,586 COVID-19 deaths, unfortunately. Globally, as of July 6, 2023, there were, since the start, 155,000. There were 767 let me leave that figure because I need to check this, but there were some 6.9 million official COVID deaths, 767 million, this is saying actual recorded number of positivity globally. Of course, many multiples of that would not have been recorded. The World Health Organization, all of the World Health Organization regions have seen reductions in the number of confirmed cases and deaths in the past month. There has also been a decrease in hospitalization and ICU admissions. Generally, in Jamaica, Madam Speaker, hospitals are experiencing an increase in admissions, with the Southern Regional Health and Western Regional at 149 and 94% of capacity respectively. Of course, being over 100% just means that we have to make space in the aisle and in the hallways for persons, additional persons. SERA and NERA, which is the Southeast Regional Health and Northeast Regional Health Authorities, 68 and 63% overall. But in SERA, the Spanish Town Hospital and the KPH are between 95 and 100% of capacity, and similarly so the University Hospital of the West Indies, 100%. Madam Speaker, the management of the University Hospital has also reported some increased occupancy levels, particularly their accident and emergency. Normally, UHWI is a referral institution, and persons tend to go there when there is a significant emergency. So it's understandable, particularly if KPH and Spanish Town are also experiencing similar high numbers. Generally, Madam Speaker, COVID-19 admissions are low, with less than 20% of isolation spaces occupied. An average of 100 patients are recorded daily. This has been the case since January this year and includes both suspected and confirmed cases. The proportion of confirmed cases, however, has shown an increase over the last month, from 12 confirmed cases on June 12th to 35 on July 10th. Of that number, 13 were moderately ill and 1 critically ill. There were no severely ill patients up to the point of this statement or the last checks that were done. I should add, however, Madam Speaker, colleagues, that many persons are not testing. And the mantra around living with COVID means that many people, even if they have a particular condition, for more often than not attempt to treat it at home. And so this doesn't necessarily mean that these are all the numbers, except to say where one turns up at an A&E with respiratory-related illness, there's an automatic test as part of an initial assessment for COVID. The Ministry of Health and Wellness continues to encourage Jamaicans to observe the infection prevention and control protocols. Although the COVID-19 numbers are relatively low, a continued increase in positivity rate may result in increase in numbers, including hospital numbers. And so the trend of increase could also, or would normally increase, numbers who seek to be admitted in hospitals. Persons who are vulnerable, such as elderly and those with comorbid illnesses, are still at risk for severe illnesses and should be shielded by adhering to hand washing, hand sanitizing, the wearing of masks, and being consistent with sneezing and coughing etiquette, especially when in public spaces. So the wearing of the mask is still recommended, particularly if you feel vulnerable or you have symptoms. As my colleague on that side, is it that you're vulnerable or you have symptoms? Or you're the elderly? Okay. Further, all eligible persons should take the influenza and COVID-19 vaccines, which are available if you contact at somewhere in a parish, but one would recommend that you contact your parish health office, especially the vulnerable populations, the over 60s, those with underlying conditions, pregnant women, other healthcare workers who are on the front line. So, Madam Speaker, in closing on this, COVID is still very present in our population. This is not an attempt at alarming the population. We have seen an uptick in cases. In a sense, the comforting aspect of that is that we're not seeing any major uptick in deaths or even in hospitalization in our isolation wards, meaning severe cases. However, the fact that it is here means that if you feel vulnerable, you must take the necessary precaution. And I think that's the advice of the government at this point in time. In terms of influenza in Jamaica, weekly visits to public health facilities for influenza-like illnesses have decreased in all categories over the past 6 weeks. Admissions for severe acute respiratory illness are below what is seen on average at this time of year, 12 admissions per week on average. However, admissions for lower respiratory tract infection, pneumonia that is, were higher than expected in the last 2 weeks. We usually see about 100 to 120 cases each week. We are now seeing a slight increase with numbers up to about 124 cases or so, 24, 25 each week. So slight uptick in pneumonia. Again, the public is reminded that persons at both extremes of age, persons with comorbidities susceptible to severe respiratory infections caused by many different viruses, same precautions that are advised for COVID-19, including taking of the influenza vaccine. All of this, Madam Speaker, highly recommended. In terms of dengue, the number of dengue cases have remained low since January. Last experienced outbreak 2018 to 2020, Madam Speaker. Clients who present with fever and other symptoms may be suspected of having dengue fever. 100 suspected dengue cases with fewer have been reported since the beginning of 2023. So 100 or so reported cases since 2023, and half of these were hospitalized. There have been no confirmed cases of dengue-related deaths so far this year, Madam Speaker. Monthly numbers of suspected dengue cases have been below average throughout the year so far, which is good. A quarter of suspected cases this year were from Kingston and St. Andrew, another quarter from St. Catherine, and Trelawney recorded the highest rate of 6.3 per 100,000 population, followed by St. Catherine 4.8 per 100,000, Westmoreland 4.6 per 100,000, And as said earlier, no confirmed deaths in fact, no confirmed deaths of dengue since 2020. And I want to pay tribute to the vector control team who go out with the fogging and the just to remind this Honorable House that this government invested the highest amount of resources in our vector control team since the last probably 25 years. We spent about $350 million, Honorable Prime Minister, with your support and the Cabinet, for new vehicles, new foggers, and we're seeing the benefits of that. No deaths of dengue since 2020. All the parishes, Northwest Manchester included. Madam Speaker, although a decreasing trend in dengue cases is noted, the dengue season will begin toward the end of summer holidays, so precautionary measures should be taken. These include preventing mosquito bites, destroying mosquito breeding sites, and of course the Ministry will continue to reiterate that through our public education program and through the work of our field team in the respective parishes. Madam Speaker, I close by taking the opportunity to remind this Honourable House and the country about the excessive heat wave that we're experiencing, not just in Jamaica, but throughout the world. And we did send out a communique on this issue, advising the public to take precaution against the heat stress that is harmful to personal and public health and potentially fatal. We are seeing record increases in temperatures, and so the public, and in particular the most vulnerable, include extreme ages, the young and the not so young, over 60s, persons with comorbidities, outdoor workers, such as our farmers and construction workers, are advised to take precautionary measures to reduce exposure to heat and to limit the serious effects it can have on the body. Outdoor workers in particular, now we may take this for granted because we assume that we are a construction worker, we're a farmer. It's important, obviously, it's our livelihood, but we can expose ourselves in an unlimited way. Heat wave, heat stroke is potentially fatal, and you don't realize it until you are out. So we would advise workers, persons who are working on the outdoors, to take the necessary precaution. Not saying that you mustn't work, but please manage your exposure to recognizing the potential threat that this heat wave represents. Hydration is critical. Water recommended as opposed to sugary drink or alcoholic beverages. Much better for hydration, the water that is. I know not everybody agrees with that, but that's the fact. For those of us who exercise regularly, like myself, do it early in the mornings or late at nights. In fact, it is recommended that we avoid, where we can, the outdoors between 11 and 4 when it's most severe. Right? Keeping to the shade as much as possible and ensuring that you get adequate rest. Rest is also important, as well as wearing light-weight, light-colored, loose-fitting clothing does help. And finally, Madam Speaker, for further information on this heat wave, firstly, you can watch the media space in terms of the temperature levels. Last week, we had 2 of the hottest days recorded in this country, and I believe in parts of the world. The hottest on record. I don't know, we can argue whether it's global warming or it's cyclical. The issue, though, is that it does pose a threat to all of us. So get your suntan if that's what you need. Keep out of the sun if you have to. Rehydrate as much as possible. And for further information, contact our health departments in the respective parishes for any additional support. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Minister, I'd like to thank you for the timely update to the country as it relates to certain important health-related matters. I see you're quick on the draw after 2 days after a certain announcement come as it relates to COVID, but c'est la vie. Minister, you indicated that the numbers of positive cases of COVID that we have been seeing basically is on the decrease because there's less amount of testing. The question that I want to ask you is has the Ministry of Health reduced the amount of testing that has been done, except for those who presented to hospitals in severe respiratory illnesses? Are we still doing a significant amount of testing in the public health sector as usually is done? Because you will appreciate that if you have less sampling, you have less numbers of persons who will be tested positive. The 22%, as you have indicated, is a little cause for concern, though it's a monthly average, as it were. Mr. I'm a bit concerned because in your report here you indicated, and I will read, the last batches of genomic sequencing done on samples collected in March and April showed its subvariants XBB .1.5 and BQ.1.1 were most prevalent. Minister, we have many genomic sequencing machines in this country. We ought not to be having reports that are still dated from samples in March and April. We are in the month of June now. Genomic sequencing takes about not more than 5 days to get back a result. So I would have expected the minister to come and tell the House that the latest genomic sequencing that we have at the ministry was for some time like last week or the week before, not 2 months ago. And it's not that we don't have the machines in the country, Minister. Prime Minister opened one at UWI. I mean, there are about 5 or 6 in the country now that have access to this type of equipment. Minister, you mentioned that the Southeast Area Health Authority has seen quite an uptick in the number of acute respiratory cases, particularly presenting at the hospitals and response for the overcrowding. Now, from reports coming out and in the media and the public domain, we hear that a lot of the cases that are seen at these hospitals are cases that could be treated at the health centers. And we know the culture of Jamaicans want to go to hospital. Could the minister give an assurance to the country that in terms of dealing with this and putting less pressure on the hospitals, that health centers can be open for an extended period, as has been done in the past to deal with the COVID crisis, to allow for some of these acute cases to be seen within the communities instead of them going to the hospitals in emergency areas, clogging up the system and preventing those who have very serious illnesses such as the gunshot wounds, the motor vehicle accidents, and all the others that require hospitalizations, ideally being seen at the hospital as opposed to those with conditions that can be treated in the community. The other point, Minister, you mentioned that the influenza vaccine is available, but it's only available to certain persons in the system. And every year, the government, the ministry loses a lot of influenza vaccines because they become spoiled at the end of their life cycle, which is about a year. Is there a way to increase it now, the availability to the public, so that, one, we prevent the number of influenza cases coming to hospitals or developing, and secondly, to prevent that waste? Finally, well, Minister, the other point you mentioned about dengue, and we're happy that we are not seeing as many cases as we had seen in former years, and deaths as we have seen, but we still have it. You are not here for my sectoral presentation, but I know you interrogated it. What has happened to that program that I think it was USA that funded it in 2018 for the sterile mosquito program that was supposed to eliminate, yes, Member Chuck, the sterile mosquito program that was supposed to eliminate the Aedes aegypti and its likelihood for causing dengue in Jamaica, as has been done elsewhere. And Minister, finally, commendations in reminding the country about the heat wave and the effects of the heat wave, because really it is, has been reported, sometime last month, or was it early this month, was the hottest time that we have seen in recorded history in terms of temperature rises. And many of us Jamaicans do not recognize the importance of keeping well hydrated, avoiding the alcohol as much as possible, and keep cool and inside, right? And inside. So it is important to again tell the people about it. But I'd prefer if you could answer those other questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, member. I appreciate the questions. The answer to the first question around have we stopped testing? No, we have not. But testing has been not been a big focus and emphasis for obvious reasons. Normalizing the arrangements in our society where COVID has become a kind of routine. It's no longer a threat, as we are seeing with the data. Everybody has it. It's become close to being the common flu, as we anticipated. So testing is available on request. So once you go to your parish, they'll tell you where you can get the testing done. But we don't want to create panic either and give an impression that somehow testing is absolutely necessary if you have a cold, because it's not. So yes, it's available. The issue of the genome sequencing, I take the point. I will say that we do have current data, and we have current testing numbers right up to July. In fact, I'm looking here at UI's numbers. Up to July, 49 tested, 6 positive, 43 negative, 12%. June, 65, 16. June was 25% positivity. So the University of the West Indies, persons who come in to A&E, they are automatically tested once it's, and they have up to current. Some of the dated numbers are linked to past samples that they have been trying to investigate and clear up and so on. So some of these numbers enter the database, not necessarily because of tardiness on the part of the people who do the testing, but because of investigations and introduction of some of these samples in a later period. I can check on it though, just to be totally transparent, to find out what if any problems there are in terms of the currency of the testing, because you're right, we have invested a lot of money in the technology, and we have more than enough capacity. The only bottleneck probably would be people. So I'll check on that, but we have some current data, which allows us to extrapolate. On the overcrowding and the extended hours for health centers, that is an option. It's an option. We have to determine whether or not we're at that stage yet. The technical people can advise me on that, but I'll take your suggestion and I'll discuss it with them. On the issue of influenza vaccines, I do agree that we do dump a lot each year, largely because healthcare workers don't take up the vaccine because they are the priority group. There are ways to access it, but I agree, there may be other ways to make it more widely available. But as of now, if someone needs it, particularly if they're vulnerable, they can actually attend to a particular health facility, inquire of it, and they can get it. So it's not that it's unavailable. But we can, health workers are really the ones that unfortunately don't take up the amount that we would like. And then on your final around the sterile mosquito program, the program has helped and is helping in that the program allowed us to train. The biggest area of help was to understand the type of mosquitoes that are in the country. And in fact, I don't know the technical term. We discovered some species that we never knew we had. And then take appropriate action around how we manage vector control, fogging, that sort of thing. It also helped in terms of training people. So the ultimate result of the program was not just about releasing sterile mosquitoes in the atmosphere, even though that was played up as the primary thing. It was also about having a program to study, to understand, and to train. And those objectives, you can tick the box on those because those are ongoing. I don't have an update on the releasing of mosquitoes. What I do have an update on, as I've said, is that we haven't lost one Jamaican to dengue since 2020, which shows that the other programs are in fact working. And that's a positive, given that that is the ultimate objective. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. I think it is important for the record that you, on page 2, that you state that it was since the beginning of this year, the COVID statistics, because what you say is as at July, but we don't know. I mean, I spoke to you in sotto voce things, but I think it's important for the record that you stated. The question, Madam Speaker, on page 2, the Minister said, as at July 10, 2023, and I had a discussion across the aisle, but I think it's important that he states for the record that it is since the beginning of this year that these are the numbers, because we're not quite sure as at which year, which date. But the other question I have, Minister, Jamaica has been pioneering in eradicating things like smallpox, measles, polio, diphtheria. There was a time when children were dying from these kinds of ailments, and a lot of that had to do with our vaccination programs, mandatory vaccination programs, especially in communities. During those times, certainly in the early 80s and moving forward, which we were able to eradicate. Jamaicans now, not only Jamaicans, but people globally, and I saw it with the COVID vaccine and even HPV vaccinations, that Jamaicans are a little bit more hesitant in terms of taking vaccines that they are not aware of. I mean, I can speak of personal experiences. Minister, is there a mandatory vaccine program for certain diseases that are in Jamaica? If so, how does it work? And what are those mandatory vaccines for? And what is the ministry's proposal to get more Jamaicans aware of the benefits of vaccines? Because there was a time in Jamaica where, I mean, where we used to take vaccinations, maybe with social media, etc. So I want that question answered. And then the third question I have, Minister, is about the heat wave. The heat wave it's hot. It's sweltering. It's awful. I mean, it's terrible. It's bad. It's hot. What, if any, when will the ministry put out a warning or a red flag or a red alert, similar to when there was like, high terrorist alerts, it's red or it's orange, to the society because you said there were 2 days that were the hottest days. Are we prepared to say to workplaces, look, based on what is happening with the heat and in the best interest of the population, you have to end work at this time for people to get home on time so they don't get stuck in public transportation and buses? And I want to know if we've been thinking or forecasting what may happen. We're just at the beginning of July. We never reach August yet. And we just have to be very clear on what we're prepared to do to save, especially our children who just can't take the heat. Thank you.
Thank you, Member, for your usual questions. So, yes, the correction on the 155 plus deaths since COVID, the start of COVID, not since July. Since March 2020. When we started to record COVID deaths, that was the time period to date, 155,000 infected on record and 3,586 deaths. The requirement for young people to do the MMR vaccine, measles, rubella, right, and mumps, is a requirement for school. And the school system, the formal public school system requires that each child, and that has gone a very far way in terms of human development and so on. But we no longer have, unfortunately, polio in the population. The other vaccines like HPV are not required. And we did launch a campaign to get parents to agree for young girls in particular, 12-age cohort, to do the HPV against cervical cancer. The take-up was low. The reality is that immunization generally, vaccines, and COVID has borne that out. There has been a much stronger lobby against it, not just in Jamaica, globally. I looked at the numbers recently, and we still are doing relatively well. In fact, when compared to the Americas, which is now somewhere in the region of 80%, 80 plus, we're 90 plus. But I don't think we should be complacent because vaccines have worked. I do believe that this generation has forgotten the days of polio and so on, and they have taken it for granted. And that we as legislators need to redouble our efforts. And indeed, in the global environment, more needs to be said about the value of immunization, vaccines in particular. So I agree that we need to do that. And we're actually discussing that now in-house. In terms of the heat wave, there is no executive decision around time off and so on. I mean, one has to be careful how one treads in that direction and recommend that. However, as said, we did send out a release a few weeks ago, and I'm speaking here now to heighten concerns and to educate the public that this is an important issue, and I agree with you, it's very hot, and people can be vulnerable, and therefore they need to take necessary advisory. But I'm happy to raise it at the level of cabinet and to have a conversation around it and see what the collective arm of the executive body may want to do beyond what I'm saying currently. Thank you.
No, you did not. Thank you, Madam Speaker. As an MP out in St. Catherine, there's a little information swirling around that there might be an institution where there is an outbreak of an acute respiratory illness. I'm not sure if you are aware. It's a training, one of the training institutions out there.
That's it?
It is out there.
All right. I am not, well, I'm not aware, but I know that we have St. Catherine as a very efficient parish health infrastructure. I'd be happy to take any information or concerns you have and raise it. But we do have these things from time to time. Unless they think it requires elevation up to my level, I probably wouldn't be told about it. So I have not heard about it. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Madam Speaker, on the matter of motions given orally, I beg to move the following motions. That at the next meeting of the House of Representatives, I will move the following motion. Whereas subsection 1GI of section 41 of the Constitution of Jamaica requires a member of this Honourable House of Representatives to vacate his seat if any firm in which he is a partner or any company of which he is a director or manager becomes a party to any contract with the Government of Jamaica for or on account of the public service, or if he becomes a partner in a firm or a director or manager of a company which is a party to any such contract. And whereas the Member of Parliament for Kingston East and Port Royal is the Managing Director of Site Eco Solutions Company Limited and may from time to time enter into contracts with the Government of Jamaica and its agencies. And whereas the member discloses interest in this company, be it resolved that this motion be referred to the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives for consideration and report. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of this House, I will move. Be it resolved, with reference to the resolution approved by this Honourable House on the 7th day of September 2022, appointing a joint select committee on the Insolvency Act 2014, that the committee be allowed to hold hybrid meetings that are partly virtual and partly physical, utilizing available information and communication technologies in the manner more specifically outlined below. Preserving the rights, powers, and privileges, including voting rights normally accorded to a member of a committee. The committee, Madam Speaker, is hereby empowered to 1. Convene and hold meetings in virtual spaces, using information and communication technologies which shall be considered committee meetings for the purpose of the mandate of the committee. 2. To allow access and participation from remote locations, as are enabled by means of information and virtual technologies by members and other persons authorized by the committee. 3. Include members accessing and participating from remote locations as a part of its quorum. 4. To receive, consider, deliberate on, and respond to feedback and submissions in formats, mode, and media, and via platforms, mode, and media enabled by means of information and communication technologies from any person. And 5thly, consider any and all information generated, communicated, and received via formats, platforms, modes, or media as enabled by means of information and communication technologies as forming part of the record of the committee meetings. Madam Speaker, I therefore further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take this motion. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
So questions?
Madam Speaker, there are a number of questions which are outstanding on the question paper. I have a set which are 2 months overdue. I have asked the House Leader to give us a commitment as to when those questions will be answered. I have colleagues as well who have questions which are running 3 months overdue. And as we move to improve our performance in Parliament, it's important that questions which are to be answered in 21 days be done. If they are not, then there should be consultation with this side to indicate why the questions can't be answered. Yeah, man, they're here. So there are at least 5 outstanding questions. So I'm asking for a commitment.
Running in an
I know, but I'm just asking for a
period.
commitment to answer them.
Right. So I only ask for accuracy. You know, veracity is an important part of this presentation. They're not accurate because there are 5 questions. There are 5 questions. And I assure you, Madam Speaker, that these 5 questions will be answered in the normal run of things because we do answer questions on this side. And Madam Speaker, this House is due to recess shortly, and the member will, in fact, have questions answered before recess.
Okay. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to sittings of the House. Motions for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. Public business.
Madam Speaker, the matters relating to public business today would normally, Madam Speaker, have revolved around the conclusion of the Child Protection Act debate. But I think that the Minister, in consultation with the members on the other side, have agreed that there is a little more time that is needed, and that time is being offered, Madam Speaker. So, but Madam Speaker, as leader of the House, I must constrain on members that this time cannot run indefinitely. And so I would expect that we conclude these deliberations for the very next sitting of the House. And I wish not to speak any further on it because the recess is due. Madam Speaker, the other items, of course, I will deal with in terms of the motions that I gave notice to earlier on. So, Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of standing orders to allow me to take the motions, notice of which I gave earlier.
Members, a question. Oh, I beg your pardon. The member did raise his hand. I apologize.
No.
Madam Speaker, notwithstanding the distraction. Madam Speaker, the House Leader mentioned about the efficiency of the House. I would just ask him to indicate when items number 1 and 14 and the order paper in my name will be dealt with. Item 1 has been there from almost time immemorial. And I would love him to indicate when we will take item love for him. I don't say that. I love him to do that. I love for you to do this. I love for you to take the items standing in my name at number 1 and number 14.
Madam Speaker, I think the member is making a pertinent point, and that in the earlier discussions that we had, and indeed in my own presentation which relates to the business of the House, I did indicate that we are structuring the House in such a way that will allow for private members' motions to be taken at periods which would not in fact conform to the regular arrangement as per the standing orders, which is saying that they should be had on Thursdays between 5 and 7 p.m. And since in the normal run of things, the House rarely, if ever, meets on a Thursday, we are reorganizing the business of the House to enable private members' motion to have a period when it is taken. So to answer the member, it is intended that the first session on our return, just ahead of the state of constituency debate, private members' motion will be entertained. Madam Speaker, you may now continue responding to the request of my
Members,
motion.
the question before the House is that there is a suspension of the standing orders to allow the House Leader to take the motions, notice of which he gave earlier. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, I now beg to move that the motions be approved.
Members, the question before the House is that the 2 motions laid on the table be approved. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. Motions approved.
Madam Speaker, it is not intended to do any further business today. I now invite you to adjourn this Honourable House until Tuesday, the 18th of July at 2 p.m. at the George William Gordon House. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Members, the question before the House is that we do adjourn until Tuesday, the 18th of July at 2 p.m. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. This House is now adjourned.